TF2x10 is often stereotyped as a mode that's too wacky for any type of serious gameplay to be done, and it's definitely a little bit crazy, more so than your normal TF2 game would be, but I don't think that's quite the case. I think there is a delicate balance to it, and I hope to kind of show that off throughout these tier lists. By this point, you know how it works. If you've not seen any tier list videos before, I would encourage you to start with the Spy video and work your way down the list, but today we're doing Pyro. The tiers are the same as they've always been. I'm not going to go through them every single time. Once again, go watch the Spy video if you've not seen anything in this series yet, but let's get started. Oh, and if you're wondering, no, you're not going crazy. I am a little bit sick, so that's why I sound a little bit more nasally than normal today. Anyway, Pyro in TF2x10 is stereotyped as a bit of a brain-dead class, because he has a couple weapons that are very, very easy to use, and also horribly unfun to play against. A couple of his weapons are really terribly designed, but Pyro actually does have a very deep kit, and if you're willing to kind of like go into the depths of your inventory and pick out weapons that you otherwise wouldn't, he can be a lot of fun to use and has some pretty fun kind of external play styles that are also pretty effective too. It's kind of hard to know exactly what Pyro does and excels at without going through each specific weapon, because the weapons that he uses changes his playstyle a lot more like other classes would. For instance, like Soldier, for instance, is always going to be the shoot rockets at people class, but Pyro can do really about anything. He's the same as he is in normal TF2, except like a lot more advanced, kind of further down the road of a multi-tool class. But yeah, let's start with the weapons here. The Flamethrower is probably the dumbest weapon in the entirety of TF2x10. The M1 function is exactly the same. The flames have all of their properties retained, but the air blast is ridiculous, for lack of a better term. Basically, you air blast at 10 times the speed and use a 10th of the ammo cost, so you can just kind of hold M2 and have a permanent air blast in front of you. Now, when TF2x10 was made all the way back in like 2013 or whatever, this wasn't that much of a problem. At that point, air blasts scaled differently. It always had a set knockback, so while it was kind of annoying to be like shoved around and kind of controlled in midair just by people levitating you with air blast, it wasn't that big of a deal. Nowadays, though, after Jungle Inferno changed it so air blast stacks, you can kind of just send people to space with this thing. It's almost unfair the amount of like control you have over enemy players' movement, so because of that, this probably is the most brain-dead weapon in the entire game. There really aren't that many counters to it other than just shoot the Pyro before he gets to you. Because of that, this is just going straight to the top of meat. I mean, this is probably in the top 5 weapons in the entirety of TF2x10. It's easily the best weapon in Pyro's kit, and it's one of the very few that I would say really actually deserves a nerf, and I don't say that much about this mode. And all of this isn't even to mention the fact that this basically makes you an anti-projectile shield. Realistically, there's not a single projectile that should touch you if you're using the stock Flamethrower. I mean, you could just run directly at direct hit soldiers. There's literally nothing they can do. Demo men using any kind of explosives just kind of like cry at the sight of you. Huntsmen can't hit you. Scouts with projectiles can't hit you. You're basically just immune to projectiles that you know exist, which is very, very powerful, especially in a game with the direct hit being as stupid as it is. Obviously, it's not doing much against bullets, but it doesn't really matter when you can just send like bullet users to space and then they can't really do anything about it. Just a fantastic weapon to use to like shove people off cliffs and everything. Really just like... use this if you don't have a soul, but at the same time, it's really good. I can't say that it's not. The back burner is the Flamethrower before the Flamethrower. Instead of having a bunch of air blasts that go really, really fast that allow you to, like, precisely air blast people off a cliff, this just has, like, one really, really stupidly powerful air blast that just sends people to space. This used to do basically what the Flamethrower does before Jungle Inferno happened, so right now it doesn't really have much of a use because the Flamethrower does the same thing but better. I mean, the single air blast from the back burner just destroys all of your ammo. You go from 200 to 0 instantaneously versus the Flamethrower, which you probably only need like maybe 30 to 40 to accomplish what you're going to do. You don't have as fine control over where people go. Yeah, it's just the air blast is all around worse, which is kind of a shame because this is a very fun weapon to kind of mess around with. Now, the flame function you might be thinking is the one saving grace of this because it does still have the crits from behind. I don't know what they did to this, though. The flame speed is reduced by half, so, like, it's really, really janky to use. The flames barely go anywhere. Like, you literally have to be either running forward or backward for your flames to do anything. Otherwise, they just kind of idle in the mouth of your flamethrower, which is kind of annoying. This is just all around not a very good weapon. It's just worse than the stock flamethrower in every way. Luckily, this is TF2x10, so that's a really, really high bar to beat. So even though this is worse than the stock flamethrower in every single way, it's still really, really good in its own right. The fact that we're even comparing it to the stock flamethrower is really good. So I'm going to put this in situationally amazing. It's not going to be as good as the stock flamethrower, but it's still comparable. You'll still get the same general use out of this that you would stock. The Degreaser is another very underrated weapon in this mode. A lot of people look at this and think like, oh, it's not like the stock flamethrower because it doesn't have like stupidly OP air blast. I'm just not going to use it. What this effectively does is it gives you infinite weapon switch speed. You switch weapons pretty much instantaneously. There's like maybe a 0.1 second delay, like literally less than the average human reaction time. There's a lot of comboing that you can do with this, and because the afterburn damage really hasn't been changed at all, you still get full afterburn damage for the most part with this. So this still has like the same capabilities as the flamethrower's M1 you'll find. That being said, this isn't as helpful as being able to just spam people off the map if you don't want to try, and a lot of people just pick Pyro and expect to have the easiest time in the world just because stock is like so overpowered. This combos so well with like a specific couple items that I can't help but think that this is like secretly really, really good. I'm gonna put this in always a great pick. There's a lot of certain builds that you can use with this that allow you to do really, really cool things, and I'll get to some of those later as I get into the secondaries and melees, but don't sleep on the Degreaser. It actually does have some really, really good potential if you're able to use it skillfully. The Flagistinator is kind of weird. So what they ended up doing to the Flagistinator in TF2x10 is they multiplied the oomph meter, the duration that it lasts, but instead of multiplying it by 10, which actually would make this really, really good, they only doubled it. Now, I say only because it's still kind of easy. There's a lot of stuff that you have in your kit available to you that allows you to build up your oomph meter pretty quickly, namely the Scorch Shot, but like really anything is going to allow you to do it. The problem with this is that there's another weapon that I would rather have for WM1ing. Not having any kind of air blast on this really does hurt in TF2x10. Okay, so I main Pyro. I have a little bit better air blast sense than a lot of other people, but even with like single air blast items like the Degreaser and even the Backburner, I can still air blast direct hit rockets if I know the soldier's about to shoot at me. The fact that I can't do this and can't have any control over enemy players' movement really hurts with the Flog, like more so than a normal TF2. And having like even 16 seconds of crits doesn't really do it for me, although it's still a lot of damage. It's just worse than another weapon that I'll get to here in a minute, but this one's kind of a weird choice for me. I never would really want to use this over anything else. I feel like it's kind of stuck in a weird limbo, but it's not bad. I'll put this in, like, situationally amazing. I'll put it at the bottom, because you can still get, like, decent damage out of this, but it's just not, like, as good as certain other choices. Speaking of certain other choices, the Dragon's Fury is kind of cracked in this mode. For the longest time, I had no idea how good this was. I played TF2x10 a lot before Jungle Inferno, and I still played quite a bit, like, on servers that hadn't updated the mode to be consistent with the Jungle Inferno stats yet. So a lot of servers that I played on disable the Jungle Inferno weapon. So I haven't had a ton of experience with this until pretty recently, but this is insane. They basically like doubled the firing speed. It's not quite double, but it's pretty dang close. So your base like firing speed without hitting anyone is actually higher than your ramped up firing speed is in vanilla, but your ramped up firing speed is insane. And because you're basically doing, like, I think it's 75 damage per shot. Let me check. Yeah, it's basically, like, 75 damage, except you deal, like, 75 damage almost 5 times a second as long as you can consistently hit people. You just shred through anyone. And this actually does still have, like, a little bit of a blast radius, so this is really, really good for groups of enemies. I mean, you can just see as I was using this, I was, like, shredding through people. You're able to, like, literally take down an 800 HP Brass Beast Heavy with the damage resistance before he can rev up, which is really, really good, especially for Pyro. So in terms of a damage primary, this is what I would want over the Flagistinator. I'm going to put this in always a great pick. I mean, this is always going to be like your main DPS cannon, I think, if you want to go for that. And even though it doesn't have the same air blast capabilities as stock, the fact that I can still air blast at a normal speed with the firing speed increase does offset the stupidity of the normal air blast speed that this has. It's really, really good. I'll put this... I think it's above the Degreaser. I think that you can do more with this than you can the Degreaser. So those are the 5 primaries. Really, you just want to choose between these 3. These 2 are kind of weird choices, but you can get somewhat decent use out of any of them. Anyway, on to the secondaries. Here's where the fun and games ends. Here's where boys become men, or die trying, I suppose. The stock shotgun is usually really, really good for most classes. It's basically just a slight stat boost in every possible area, damage, firing speed, reload speed, accuracy, that type of thing. And because of that, I mean, the shotgun itself is already a pretty good weapon, so you're gonna get pretty good use out of this no matter what. And because this comes with a base primary ammo boost, this also helps with a lot of classes who really value having extra primary ammo in their kit. Now, Pyro, on the other hand, really, really, really values having extra primary ammo in his kit, and also having a hit scan secondary is really good for reasons that I'll talk about in a little bit. But generally speaking, this is probably one of Pyro's best secondaries in the entire game. Having really good consistent hit scan damage means that you can obliterate other Pyros who are trying to air blast you. If you're going up against another air blast Pyro and you're trying to like shove each other off a cliff, this just can one-shot them. It's really, really nice. This gives you 10 times the amount of air blasts that you would normally have, which is almost a full minute of just being able to hold down M2. Obviously, that's really, really good. This is just like a fantastic choice all around for Pyro. I can only think of very specific circumstances where this wouldn't be like among the best choices for you, so I'm going to put this in meat. Similar to in stock TF2, Pyro is a very secondary heavy class, so there's a couple secondaries to choose from, but this I think is the best class to get use out of the shotgun in TF2x10, because Pyro really does appreciate the ammo boost and the hit scan damage. The reserve shooter is strange, kinda, because it basically is like, number one, a really good way to really annoy rocket jumping soldiers, and a good way to transfer your switch speed to your secondary. The problem is that Pyro really, really wants a good secondary. This just isn't going to do it for you. If you want faster switch speed, you can use the Degreaser with almost no hassle to you. I can't think of a single scenario where you want to give up 5 shells in your clip for faster switch speed. That's just never gonna happen. Just in general, I never really saw the use for this. Even the main stat of being able to do crits to rocket jumping enemies, I never found the use for it, because, like, typically I was hitting, like, up to 54s with this, which isn't that good, especially because you have a bunch of flare guns that can do more damage per hit than that. So this is just kind of a terrible weapon. The only use that I can think of this is like in very specific situations where you want like faster switch speed, but you don't want to use the Degreaser, which doesn't really happen ever, but it might. I'm gonna put this in only 1 or 2 uses. I can't think of what the 1 or 2 uses would be, but I'm not gonna discount that they might exist. The panic attack is literally a worse version of the reserve shooter. I talked about this more in the soldier video. I'm not gonna get a ton into it here. You can sum it up by saying it literally does like 1 damage on hit. I'm not kidding you. I have no idea why anyone would use this thing. Never use this, okay? Literally just use stock. There's no reason to use this. Go ahead and actively terrible. On to the flare guns. The flare gun itself is really, really deceptively overpowered, okay? I came into this tier list thinking like, oh, who would ever use this? Because this offers no mobility. The Scorch Shot just does more damage total. What is this all about? Okay, so here's the thing, right? This literally does double damage. I have no idea why I didn't know this, but you can hit burning targets for 180. Combine this with the fact that the Degreaser allows you to switch weapons almost instantaneously, and you can remove people from the face of the planet before they're able to react. This is the silliest combo I've ever seen. I literally found this as I was testing these weapons out for this tier list. I'd never tried this before. This is now one of my favorite weapon combos in TF2x10. You can flare punch other pyros who are moving away from you. Yeah, this is just really good. This is gonna go... So, okay, here's the deal with the flare gun, right? I still think, like, in other situations where you're not using the Degreaser, this isn't as good. But if you are using the Degreaser, then this becomes, like, legitimately overpowered. So, I'm gonna split the difference, and I'm gonna put it in always a great pick. I mean, this is always going to be a great pick for you, even if you're using, like, stock or something. Being able to hit people that are far away for 180 is really, really nice. It doesn't give you some of the niceties of the shotgun, but that amount of damage is just really, really good. And the only, like, times that you wouldn't want to use something like this are if you're fighting danger shield snipers or other pyros. Other than that, like, yeah, this is, like, gonna be one of your best choices. The Detonator is kind of a silly weapon. You can kind of go to space with this thing. This is basically the opposite of the stock Flamethrower, because you can get to the top of Higher Tower and 2 jumps with this. Like, it goes really, really high. I'll give this my Higher Tower. This is, like, almost a Higher Tower, like, Platinum star of approval, but yeah, I'll give this a gold star. It's probably, like, the best weapon in the game for climbing the Higher Tower. The weird thing with this, though, is that outside of climbing the Higher Tower, this doesn't have a ton of uses. This does an insane amount of self-damage. Pyro already has a really good choice for more controlled jumping that doesn't, like, just remove half your health in one jump. This is just, like, a good weapon in really extreme cases, but I'm not judging this tier list based on really extreme cases. So I'm gonna put this in, like... I don't know. I'm going to put this in either at the bottom of only 1 or 2 uses. Although, no, I'll put it in the bottom of situationally amazing, because I think that it's, like, still usable as a primary. I mean, it still does, like, damage and afterburn damage and stuff. It works, but at the same time, it takes a lot more, like, fine control to go exactly where you want. Just because the jump is so powerful, it's, like, you're gonna overshoot where you're aiming for most of the time. I was really struggling to try to use this. It's not as bad if you're not using the power jack, but, like, why would you not use the power jack is the other question, so it's just, I don't know, it's kind of a worse version of the jetpack. I'll put it in here, but if you're not gonna climb the Higher Tower, there's no point for this over the jetpack, in my opinion. The Scorch Shot is just a silly weapon. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is probably one of the most annoying weapons in TF2x10. This, like, ties with the Flamethrower for giving pyros the reputation that they're just, like, mentally deficient. Most pyros will just use stock on the Scorch Shot, and it's effective. Like, again, I can't say it's not effective, because it does do the job, but if you use this combination, you probably don't have a soul, or you're fighting kunai spies, in which case you've had to sell your soul. Either way, you're at a loss for, like, the soul department here, and this is just really stupid. Now, talking objectively about this, it is really, really good. You basically can, like, hit everyone that's currently in view of the flare explosion. Anyone in line of sight is going to catch on fire. It's just, like, it's just a free afterburn damage machine. What I do like about this weapon, though, is that you can use this as complex or as simple as you want. I mean, you can just spam this out of spawn and get a bunch of assist kills if that's how you want to play the game. Or, if you actually know what you're doing, you can shoot at random floors and use it basically as echolocation based on hit sound. Which I know that sounds like kind of a silly way to use this weapon, because it's like, well, that's a lot of work for just moving around. But Pyro's kind of a glass cannon, and making sure you know how to line up your air blasts, and, like, that you're standing in a good position to be between, or I guess, like, behind someone to air blast them off a cliff. That's important, and you can use this, if you get really good with this, you can use this as, like, sonar almost, which is kind of cool. I like that. I like doing this with it, but just spamming this and dealing a frick ton of damage with afterburn, it works, okay? I'm gonna put this in meat, because it really is one of Pyro's best weapons. I still think the shotgun's better. Honestly, I really do, because this just does a lot more damage and has a lot more utility than the Scorch Shot does, but this is good, okay? You're gonna get a lot of use out of this. It's just not the most fun way to play the game, in my opinion. And the last of the flare guns, the Man Melter, it's alright, I guess. guess. It's pretty similar to how it is in normal TF2, except they've made it so you get 10 crits for extinguishing instead of 1, pretty standard. The projectile speed is doubled, or the projectile speed bonus is doubled, sorry, which I guess also results in the speed being doubled, but you don't notice that a ton. I mean, it's not like that huge of a change. And you can not reflect this, which, I mean, like, you also can't reflect the shotgun, which does infinitely better damage than this, but in general, I don't mind this. I mean, if someone's spamming the Scorch Shot, this does allow you to, like, just vacuum up all the fire and then get an infinite amount of crits, similar to how the Frontier Justice works. Unlike how the Frontier Justice works, this just has a better damage alternative than the Flare Gun, where the Flare Gun just does double damage to burning targets, and you can just hit people for 180, while this, I mean, it does do 90s, like, you can hit people for 90s, but it requires a lot more specific situations to use. That being said, though, I think if there is a Scorch Shot Pyro on the other team, this does allow you to have a lot of just free 90 damage range hits, even if it means you can't use the shotgun or the Scorch Shot or whatever, so I'll put this in situationally amazing. I mean, like, I did get decent use out of this as I was testing it. I was able to consistently just have, like, over 40 crits in there, and I mean, really, once you're at 40 crits, like, you're probably not gonna burn through those that often, I'll be honest with you, but it's good for just, like, having a good, like, pocket 90 damage, if nothing else. I like this. I'll put it above the Detonator. I think you get more use out of this. The Thermal Thruster was another Jungle Inferno weapon that I had no idea how it worked until I tried it somewhat recently, and holy god, this thing is insane. I was kind of thinking this was a crutch, right? Like, oh, just get good at the Detonator, and you can teleport halfway across the map, and you don't have to, like, do all of these jetpack jumps. This recharges really, really quickly, though. I mean, like, this almost gives you some of the best mobility in the game. Better than rocket jumps, because you can use it while you're in midair. Probably not as good as sticky jumps, because you don't get a ton of distance, but, like, you can fly around the map with this. Like, this is, like, seriously, some of the best mobility that anyone can have. The only thing that I don't like about this is that it doesn't give you any kind of ground speed bonus, so you actually do have to, like, suffer the animation of pulling it out to get any kind of use out of this, which is kind of a pain, because it does have a little bit of an obnoxious switch speed. So if it had ground speed bonus, like, similar to the Power Jack, I would definitely think that this would be, like, one of Pyro's best mobility options, but it's not the best. It's still really good, though. I'll put this in the top of always a great pick. I don't quite think it's meta, because I think if you're playing Pyro to the best capability and the most effectiveness that you can, you're going to want something that deals damage, but, like, this just allows you to have unparalleled movement, which works really good with, like, literally any of his weapons, so I'll put this here. I think that this is one of the more fun weapons that you could use. I'll put it that way, and definitely the best for melee-centric playstyles. And we reach the end of the secondaries with the Gas Passer. Now, before I display the stats on screen, let's all ponder for a minute. This is like the worst weapon in normal TF2. How do you think they fixed this and made it the most powerful thing in the game in TF2x10? They didn't. It's a trick question. It still freaking sucks. So what they've done is they've basically made it more spammable. The problem is that doesn't matter, because gas, it doesn't do anything, okay? If you want to light someone on fire, you literally can press 1 on your keyboard and then press 1 on your mouse, and they're on fire. You don't have to, like, deal a ton of damage and wait for this to recharge. There's no reason to use this. I'm gonna put this in actively terrible. Use the Scorch Shot. You can light everyone on the map on fire at the same time and do damage, versus this, which you have to, like, precisely aim and then hope some of your teammates do the damage for you. It's like, it's the same problems as, like, normal TF2, except now the Scorch Shot is legitimately broken, and this barely has any kind of compensation. It's just garbage. Just never equip this thing. It's so stupid. On to the melees. There are a couple of them. Pyro's melees are not as cut and dry as you'd think. There's one really, really good one. You probably already know what it is, because I think I've accidentally already said it. But all of them have at least some use, I think. No, actually, I take that back. Half of them have some use, so it's not as cut and dry as you might think. The Fire Axe is not one of those weapons. So the Fire Axe, okay, in the TF2x10 creators' defense, they actually did upgrade the Fire Axe in a meaningful way. They gave this bleed damage, which means that you can actually stack this and fire damage and have, like, double the damage over time effect as normal. The problem is that similar to normal TF2, this is still a direct downgrade from a different weapon. It's just not the same different weapon as it is in vanilla. This is like, okay, I'll put this in only 1 or 2 uses. I'm sure you could find use for the bleeding effect. Again, stacking damage over time works. You'll get some decent use out of this, like maybe if you hit someone with this, because 10 seconds of bleeding is a pretty good amount. That's like 80 damage total, and if you like just spam the Scorch Shot at them too, then you're really making someone like panic until they get to a health pack, which can be a pretty gimmicky and maybe somewhat effective playstyle. It's just a worse version of another damage over time weapon, which just outclasses it by like miles. The Hamshank is alright for Pyro. What the Hamshank does is it basically has like a 20% faster firing speed. There are different stat variations for the different all-class melees, like the Frying Pan has 10% damage and 10% firing speed. But the real star of the show here is that it gives you fall damage immunity on wear. Now, unlike some of the other classes that could use this, Pyro doesn't really care. Pyro already has, like, a consistent damage-dealing option, 2 of them, in fact. Pyro has a mobility option that negates most of the fall damage anyway. The jetpack basically has the unique stat of, like, reducing your fall damage by 80%, I think is the official amount. I don't actually know, but you just don't take fall damage with the jetpack ever, so this isn't as valuable on Pyro as it is for a lot of other classes, and this suffers a lot of the same errors, or not errors, same issues as the Fire Axe does in normal TF2. This works, though, okay? I'll put this in consistently average. I mean, like, this can be fine. I don't know when you would ever want to choose this, but, like, it's never going to be a bad option for you either. It's just not going to have a lot of the gadgets and gizmos that a lot of the better melees are going to have. The third degree is probably the glitchiest weapon in the entire game. Okay, so before I tell you what it does, let me tell you what it's supposed to do, because what it's supposed to do is actually kind of cool. So you basically have the normal, like, hitting all of the people that the medics are healing stat. You also have guaranteed crits against overhealed players, which is really nice. That allows you to delete medics in one hit just by hitting their heal target. The downsides, though, are that you don't have any random crits to compensate, and you don't have any compression blast, which is a problem. That is something that legitimately hurts this weapon. Now, this is all theoretical, of course. Thankfully, this doesn't actually have a working no air blast stat. The air blast is fine if you use this. The other problem is that this doesn't actually do crits against overhealed targets. So it's just the normal third degree with no random crits. And to kind of, like, kick you in your toes, this also doesn't even, like, have the cool cosmetic effect of turning people to ash. Why would you use this? No reason. What I was thinking was, like, oh, maybe you could find, like, some kind of use for, like, dealing with vaccinator targets, because unlike in normal TF2, you can't just instantly win the game by just WM1ing targets. In TF2x10, they can be immune to fire forever, which can cause you problems. You're not going to survive, I promise you. If you try to run up to someone and, like, kill them with no random crits, it's going to take, like, a guaranteed 3 to 4 swings. You're probably not going to survive a direct hit soldier heavy, literally anyone. So, not a good option. I'm going to put this at the very top of actively terrible. I think if you really tried, you could get use out of this. It's not worth it. There are just so many better options that would do the exact same thing better. The Extinguisher and the Postal Pummeler, which isn't on this tier list template that I found, they do different things. The differences between them are how much damage they're supposed to deal, how fast they deploy and holster. I think, like, one of them has less damage against non-burning players. It's really weird. Here's the issue, right? None of them do any damage. Don't use this weapon. It's so garbage. Literally, it is worse to hit somebody that's burning with this because it extinguishes them than to just not do anything and to just unequip this weapon. This is probably the first weapon that I've seen that's like, it literally a downside to try to attack people with. Go on to the bottom of actively terrible. Don't use it. The Home Wrecker and the Maul, they all do the same thing. Oh, and I should clarify, all the Flamethrowers do the same thing. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but all of the reskins, except for the Extinguisher and the Postal Pummeler for Pyro, are consistent. But the Home Wrecker does pretty good things. It basically just makes you immune to sentries and allows you to just frickin' delete whatever sentries or buildings you come across. It's a guaranteed one-shot kill on any building, regardless of level, regardless of anything. That's really, really nice, especially because it allows you to have full immunity to mini sentry spam. It allows you to have most immunity to level 3 sentries, because the rockets still do damage, and you only have the immunity while this is deployed, so you can't, like, just walk up to things and reflect the rockets. It kind of is a problem against level 3s, but against anything else, this is just a free win button against an engineer nest. For countering sentries, this is really nice. For doing, like trying to counter nests, I mean, this is, like, the best choice you have. This is actually probably one of the best melees and combinations of melees for destroying higher tower sentry nests, so I won't give it the star of approval, because that's not specific to higher tower, but it's still really nice for that. I'm going to put this in situationally amazing right at the top here. I can't recommend this if there aren't buildings on the other team. That's the only reason it's not going any higher. But for just having basically a free win against what otherwise would be one of your biggest counters, yeah, I mean, cool. I'll take that any day. The Power Jack. It allows you to go fast all the time, regardless of whether you're holding it, regardless of whether you want to or not. Yeah, you just go fast. Now, the problem is, and here's what really pisses me off about the Power Jack, is that you have a 100% damage vulnerability on wear, or not damage, sorry, bullet damage vulnerability on wear when you have this equipped. Now, the reason that this pisses me off is because Heavy has the same thing, except it doesn't have any damage vulnerabilities. Heavy is just kind of, like, ridiculously overpowered in this mode, which is kind of more of a testament to Heavy than Pyro, but it still annoys me that this has a downside and Heavy doesn't. This kind of has to be here because Flamethrowers would otherwise just be really, really stupid if there wasn't any counter to, like, being air blasted around, but assuming we lived in a perfect world where you couldn't just, like, have a free win button in the form of the Flamethrower, this really should have its downside reduced. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Being fast, as you might imagine, is good. This is probably the best melee that you could have for Pyro. I'm going to put this in meat. There's really no reason not to be fast most of the time. The only reason that I ever unequip this is if there's a mini sentry, in which case I probably just go a different class. But if I wanted to play Pyro and there's a mini sentry, or if I'm going like a specific melee-centric playstyle, then I'll try other things. This is just a really good default option, though. I'll put this above these two, because it's just, Pyro having that good a mobility is just really, really good. There's no reason not to do it. The Back Scratcher, aka the delete button, allows you to do a lot of damage, as you might expect. The thing about the Back Scratcher is that it's basically a better replacement for any other melee you might be using that'll do damage. There's no reason to use the melee that, like, does bleed, or, like, that kind of has more firing speed when you could just equip the thing that does minus 683 on a crit. It's really, really stupid. This is, like, one of Pyro's best damage options in the game, and if the Power Jack didn't give you, like, as good of a mobility boost as it did, I would probably put this higher, but I'll put this above the Hamshankin consistently average, because, like, not having the speed boost on melee kind of sucks, but this is still really good to just be able to whip it out and delete people if you want to do that. Oh, and also, yes, this basically does allow any health pack to become a full health pack, which is also kind of nice, but at the expense of not being healed by medics, which can be a problem occasionally. It's still a pretty good deal, though. The Sharpened Volcano Fragment, unlike the Gas Passer, actually got respect in this mode. They looked at this and said, oh my god, this is a cool looking weapon, let's make it do things. What this does is it basically makes you have 10 times the afterburn damage as normal. So if you hit somebody, they take minus 40 per tick on afterburn, which, as you might imagine, is really, really good. It's basically just a walk up to somebody, smack them in the face, and watch them bleed the death, or not bleed the death, burn the death really, really quickly as you fly away with your jetpack, or do what other nonsense you want to do with that. While I would still rather have something that does, like, a ton of damage instantaneously, this is a really, really good side grade to the Back Scratcher because this does more total damage. This actually can do enough damage to just remove heavies from the game that aren't under the effects of Delicos. And if you are running this like with a medic and you wanted to run like maybe a quick fix medic or a vaccinator medic or something and have the extra damage on you, then this is a really good option because you can still get healed by medics. But other than this is just a really good weapon. A lot of people don't use this because they just assume that it's like stupid because it's the Volcano Fragment, but running up the people, hitting them, and then watching them just like really quickly lose all of their health is really, really fun. And if this were a fun tier list, this would probably go at the top, but I'll put this right below the Back Scratcher. I think these do about the same thing. The Back Scratcher is still better, but this has like really niche use, or not really niche, but like really solidified niche use cases outside of this that I don't think the difference is full tier. I think that these are still super comparable. The Neon Annihilator, I'll be honest with you, because I play on higher tower, because that's like what most servers that are actually populated run for TF2x10, I don't use this enough. I don't have a ton of first-hand experience with this to tell you whether it's like amazing or bad. Based on what the stats say, though, it looks really weird. I don't know what this is even trying to be, because it gives you like less damage against non-wet players, but also less damage against non-burning players, so I don't know what that's about. But this is just the normal Neon Annihilator. It does the same exact thing. It's just a worse version of either of these two weapons, so like maybe if you wanted... Okay, here's the one niche use case that I would say use this in. If you're getting healed by a medic, so you can't use the Back Scratcher, and you want a Pyro Shark, so you can't use the Volcano Fragment, then this might be an okay choice, but like at that point, what are you even doing? So I'll put this in only 1 or 2 uses. I'll put this above the Fire Axe at least. Outside of those specific situations, don't use this. It's just a stupid weapon. Oh, and before I move on, this is the only weapon in the entirety of TF2x10 that I'm aware of that has a difference between like qualities of the item. So if you are using a unique, collector's, vintage, or strange Neon Annihilator, it will do exactly the listed stats. If you're using a genuine Neon Annihilator, it has 100% less damage against non-burning players instead of 25. Why? What's the point of that? I can't help but think that the makers of this mod just like had a friend who owned like a genuine Neon Annihilator and he just really hated him, so he just made that. I don't know what the point of that could possibly be. I don't know how that even happened. So yeah, that's a fun bit of trivia for you. Anyway, moving on to the Hot Hand, the last pyro weapon on the list. The Hot Hand does nothing, basically. No damage anyway. It does like 2 damage per hit. It fires really fast, so you can like very easily rack up the like amount of slap feeds that you're getting, which is kind of funny, I guess. I've gotten up to like over 100 on just one person by chasing him down before, which is kind of funny. The main function of this weapon that I would say is probably the speed boost stat, because if you can hit somebody, you get a 100-second speed boost, which is really, really nice, especially because this makes it theoretically at least, this makes it a utility melee because you can like hit somebody and get a speed boost. The problem is that you have to get into melee range of somebody at normal speed and hit them, which can kill you very quickly. And number 2, the speed boost that you get is not as good as the Power Jacks. The Power Jacks actually gives you, it like maxes out your speed. The Hot Hand only gives you the like default TF2 speed boost, like the same as you'd be getting if you got like whipped or something. So because of that, I think that this is like a much worse option than the Power Jack, but if you're just getting wrecked by bullets or like heavies or something, or just causing you a major problem, this is a halfway decent alternative. I'm going to put this at the top of only 1 or 2 uses because of that. I've used this item once for that like exact purpose, and I got halfway decent use out of it too. I mean, like it worked. It's just like usually just use the Power Jack. That's the alternative to this, because like I would much rather be able to dodge damage than to like take less and still probably die very quickly. So anyway, that is all of the pyro weapons. I'm tempted to move one of the situationally amazing weapons up into consistently average just to like make it a perfectly even tier list, but that's not how we do things. That's not science. You'll just have to live with this. Anyway, to talk more about when exactly you would want to use certain weapons. The flamethrowers is generally a pretty cut and dry choice. Stock is the superior option almost all the time, especially if the maps have hazards. You can very easily, like, control people, air blast them off a cliff, literally just even stun locking them in corners and, like, bouncing them up and down and making them take fall damage is a really good way to use this weapon. It's just really overpowered right now as it is. You can pretty much control other people's games. They really can't play the game if you're doing that to them, which does become pretty annoying if we're being honest, but it's a good weapon, just in factual terms. It is very, very effective. In terms of other flamethrowers, the Dragon's Fury is really, really good if you just want a DPS flamethrower. This actually does comparable DPS to a lot of the miniguns, which is, I mean, really, really nice. And the Degreaser, if you're setting up for combos, especially with the flare gun, I mean, like, being able to do just, like, almost 270 damage combos is insane, okay? Like, you don't understand how good it is being able to do 270 in less than a blink of an eye just by getting up to somebody, which, that's like direct hit, but you can also, you still have, like, an air blast, you still have, like, really good ground movement. Like, it's just a really silly combo that I would encourage you to try. But yeah, all three of these have pretty defined use cases. The Flog and the Backburner, not so much. Again, I find them to be worse versions of existing weapons, but you can try them out for fun. I think the Backburner is really good if you're just, like, trolling the ever-living crap out of somebody, because, like, you just waste a ton of their time. The flamethrower, the stock flamethrower, when you air blast somebody, it makes them go in whatever direction you're air blasting for the most part, but the Backburner makes them go up, and it usually has more power, so they're just kind of, especially on maps like Higher Tower, you just waste, like, almost 30 seconds of their time by right-clicking on them once. It's kind of a silly weapon. It's just, like, yeah, use this as, like, a troll weapon, maybe. Other than that, I can't really recommend it. In terms of a Generalist Pyro build, the Power Jack is going to be the best melee for you. Same thing with the Shotgun or Scorch Shot being the best. I think Generalist Pyro is the most effective that you can do, just because Flamethrower Air Blast is so good. But if you're playing specific play styles, I think all the weapons kind of lay everything out for you. The Jetpack allows you to get around the map really, really quickly. It allows you to get next to enemies, get away from enemies. It allows you to climb the tower also pretty quick. I'm not going to give it the star, because I think it does still take a while to get up the tower. Gold star needs at least under a minute to get up there. That's my criteria, but in terms of, like, just general map mobility, yeah, this is the best thing that you can have. The damage dealing melees I've kind of already talked about, so I won't go into that again, but Pyro's kind of nice because you can kind of mix and match some options. You can play around with it at your leisure and have fun with it too. I mean, like, a lot of people stereotype Pyros as being like, oh, Scorch Shot and Flamethrower and Power Jack, wow, they sure are good at the game. Don't be that person. You don't have to be that person. That's the nice part about Pyro. You can play him any way you want, and there are a lot of effective ways to play Pyro. I was having a lot of fun with Dragon's Fury and Jetpack especially. I was having a lot of fun with Degreaser and Flare Gun. You can even do, like, really specific weird setups, such as, like, you using Scorch Shot and having a friend go, like, Sun on a Stick. There are plenty of things to try. Pyro is kind of a mix and match class. He's not as brain dead as you think if you really get into the meat of him, so try him out. Don't be a person with no soul. Try weapons that are actually fun and not the stock. Hopefully the stock gets nerfed soon. We can only hope and pray at this point, but yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. I hope to finish these soon, hopefully. We'll see what happens. I only have 3 left. I'll do Sniper next, and then probably Scout, and then Medic. I think that's the order that I'm locked in on. Hopefully we can finish them by, like, maybe February. And yeah, that's it. Let me know any feedback you have for the series. Otherwise, have a good one.